Hey folks, this is my 2002 Jetta TDI, and we're getting this car ready to sell. As you can see, we have a whole pile of parts to install, so let's not waste any time. Okay, so once again, we're getting this car fixed up and ready to sell to help pay for parts for the BMW. But as I mentioned in the last video, we're going to tackle this project in 3 stages. Stage 1 is going to be all the mechanical stuff. We need to replace the power steering pump. There's also a leak in the cooling system we need to handle. There's also a leak in the air conditioning, and also we're going to replace the brakes. Phase 2 is going to be the interior, which if you saw the last video, it's pretty crusty in there. And phase 3 will be the exterior, paint correction, and also we're going to refinish the wheels. This video is phase 1, so we're going to tackle all this mechanical stuff. And actually, I think I want to start with the brakes because, they're pretty easy. So let's do that. Okay, so brake hardware for these cars is actually pretty cheap. I got a complete set of pads and rotors, front and rear, for this car for just over $150. But I think before I install them, I want to clean all the crusties out of the wheel wells. Once again, this car has been sitting for a long time, so it accumulated a lot of foreign debris in here. Okay, so replacing the brakes is pretty straightforward. To remove the caliper, you've got 2 bolts, one up top and one down here. On the rear caliper, they're 13 millimeter. Once the caliper is loose, you can pop the brake pads off. They're going to be captivated inside the bracket here. On the rear brakes on this car, I did not have to remove the bracket to get the brake rotor out. I was able to finagle it out without doing that. Also, these cars have a screw here that is normally here to help hold the brake rotor onto the hub. It's basically just to make your life easier when you're installing the brakes. On this one, that screw broke off inside the hub, and I didn't bother replacing it. It'll be fine. Also, you can see we got some more crusties in here and lots of brake dust. So I think we're going to clean this up with some super clean. We'll let it dry out, and then we will install our new brake parts. Okay, so the front brakes are slightly different. Of course, the caliper still has 2 bolts, one up here and one down here. However, these bolts take a 7 millimeter hex key or Allen wrench, whatever you want to call it. Also on the front brakes, the brake pads clip into the caliper. So you pop the pads out of the caliper, then you remove the brake rotor after you remove that screw, if it's still there. Oh, and by the way, these are centering rings for my aftermarket wheels. Yeah. Okay, so the front calipers have this little tab that catches on the caliper mounting bracket. So when you go to remove the caliper, you actually need to start at the top. Just like that. I did this off camera, but now that the camera is rolling, it's not going to work. Really? More crusties. Yeah, we're definitely putting the Super Clean to work today. Oh, I forgot to mention the left front inner brake pad has a wear sensor built in. So to unplug it, you have to squeeze on this tab right there and then pull it off.
Yeah, me.
Okay, that was an improvement. We'll let that dry while I go eat lunch, then we'll come back and install our new brakes. Okay, let's install some brakes. Now the front brakes are actually pretty straightforward. You first take the rotor, put it onto the hub with the set screw. Then you take the pads and you load them into the caliper, and you put the caliper on. Pretty straightforward. However, there are a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, there are two different kinds of pads. You can see the clips on these are different. This is the inboard pad. You can see the clips are more substantial. This is the outboard pad. Also, since this is the left front caliper, this caliper has the inboard pad with the wear sensor. Also, before you install the caliper, you want to compress the piston with your choice of a squeezing device. I just use a big old C-clamp, but whatever works for you. Also, don't forget to plug in the wear sensor. Okay, so the back brakes have some extra steps thanks to the parking brake hardware. So for example, you can't just push the piston in, you actually have to rotate it in until it bottoms out. Now, I have a tool for this, but unfortunately, it does not fit. So, we're going to improvise. Okay, so actually I found a method that works a little bit better. You take your needle nose pliers and some adjustable pliers, and you grab your needle nose with the adjustables like this, and then you rotate it. Okay, so in order to fully retract the piston inside the caliper, you actually have to push on it while you rotate it. That can be problematic if you don't have the special tool, because of course the caliper is on sliders and it wants to move around. So you have to figure out how to lock the caliper in place. And what I did was I just wedged a block of wood between the caliper and the shock absorber. So now it doesn't move. Okay, so unfortunately I couldn't push hard enough by hand to compress the piston while I rotate it. So we have this crazy setup with the big old C-clamp and the double plier setup to turn the piston while the clamp pushes on it. This is a mess. Look, if you have access to that special tool for this, get it, because this is a pain in the ass. Okay, finally we got it to fit on there. And by the way, how these calipers attach on the back is they have two of these bolts that go into the slider in the bracket, And when you go to tighten the bolt, that slider is going to want to turn. So they put wrench flats on the slider so you can hold it in place with a 15mm wrench, just like that, while you tighten the bolt. And by the way, the bolt takes a 13mm socket. Okay, so the brakes are completed. And the back brakes were more of a hassle than I bargained for. But anyway, let's move on. So I think next we will tackle the power steering pump. It lives right there, so theoretically it should be fairly easy to get to, although you can see there is some stuff blocking access to the mounting bolts. Believe it or not, the maintenance manual actually says to get a big screwdriver and do that. Okay, so I don't think there's enough room to remove the mounting bolts with the power steering pulley in place. So the pulley has to come off first. That means we need to sneak an Allen key in here and get those 3 bolts. I'm actually going to do that with the belt still on, so the belt will help to keep the pulley from rotating while I'm trying to crack those bolts loose. And after I crack the bolts loose, then we'll take off the belt, and then we will remove those bolts, and then we can undo these bolts. Okay, so I was able to access those pulley bolts with a 6mm Allen key and a very short extension on my ratchet wrench. Okay, so to relieve tension on the serpentine belt, we have to access the belt tensioner, which is buried way down in there. There's a hexagon-shaped nub on the tensioner, and as you can see, I've got a 16mm wrench on there. I actually had to reach up from underneath the car and push the one splash shield out of the way to get the wrench in there. Fun times. Anyway, now we can get that pulley off of the power steering pump. Okay, so the bolts are out, but the pulley does not want to come off. Oh, and by the way, that pump is smoked. There we go. Nope, nope, you're not going down, you're coming up. Up. Alright. Now for the pump. Okay, so the high pressure fitting is a 22mm banjo bolt, and on the low pressure side we just have a hose with a spring clamp. Oh, and also before I undo these, I think I'm going to extract the fluid from the reservoir. Okay, so we have the lines disconnected from the power steering pump. Also, I've got a drain pan down there so we don't make a big mess. And keep in mind the banjo bolt has crush washers on it, so be careful not to lose them. Anyway, all we need to do now is remove the 3 bolts from the front of the pump and that 1 bolt from the back, and it should come out. Oh, and by the way, all 4 of those bolts take a 13mm wrench. Okay, all the bolts are out, but we have this sleeve on the back of the pump here that's putting a little bit of tension on the back of the pump. So we're going to use a pry driver to carefully pry on the pump here and loosen up that sleeve just a tiny bit. There we go. Yeah. Oops. Okay, so off camera, I turned the steering wheel all the way to the left and all the way to the right a couple times to squeeze the remaining power steering fluid out of the system. And oh boy, did I make a mess. Okay, so here's our new power steering pump. Let's get this installed. When you go to reinstall that banjo bolt, remember that there are two crush washers. One go above the banjo fitting and one goes below the banjo fitting. Just like that. Okay, so we have our power steering pump installed. We have the pulley installed on the pump. We have all of our lines hooked back up over here and over there. However, I am not going to reinstall the serpentine belt because next I'm going to replace the AC compressor. I think I forgot to mention this, but off camera I went to put some dye in the AC system to find the leak, and long story short, I found out the compressor is not compressing. The clutch activates and it turns the compressor, but it hardly generates any pressure differential. So we're going to be basically doing a complete AC system overhaul. But we're going to do that in the next video. So, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.